Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're diving into one of literature's most famous stories, Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah, it's a story that's been captivating audiences for, gosh, centuries, really. And, especially for lit students, it's an amazing look into how Shakespeare wrote and the themes of the play, they still kind of hit home today.
For sure. So you gave us a ton of great material on this. We're ready to, really break it down.
Mhm.
So first, what makes this play, Romeo and Juliet, so important to, people studying literature?
Well, I think the first thing is it's a tragedy, but it's not like a simple sad story. You know what I mean? It follows a really particular structure, one that, Aristotle himself talked about way back, like centuries before
Oh,
Shakespeare.
yeah, Aristotle, so the original drama critic. But how does a play, written back in Elizabethan England connect to these ancient Greek ideas about tragedy?
It really is fascinating how these ideas, they kind of go beyond time and culture. Aristotle, he thought a real tragedy, it needs a noble hero or heroine, and they fall apart often because of a problem with their personality. And Shakespeare, he takes that idea and makes it, fresh and new with Romeo and Juliet.
Okay, so we have these young lovers, and they're from these families that hate each other, the Montagues and the Capulets. But are Romeo and Juliet really these noble heroes in the classic sense? I mean, they seem more like, I don't know, love-struck teenagers.
Right. And I think that's part of what makes Shakespeare so good. He can take these big, important figures and make them, I don't know, people you can relate to. They're young, they're impulsive, and they're just controlled by passion. You almost forget that they're supposed to be these, high society people.
So their tragic flaw is not just that they're, in love, it's that they're young and intense feelings. They make them blind to what could happen.
Exactly. Their love, yeah, it's beautiful, it's powerful, but it's like a double-edged sword, you know? It gives them the guts to rebel, but it also makes them make these rash decisions. And in the end, that seals their fate.
And that brings up the whole fate versus free will thing. I mean, right at the start of the play, the chorus calls them star-crossed lovers. So is Shakespeare saying that they're doomed from the beginning?
That's the question that everybody keeps asking, audiences and scholars, is it fate or is it just bad choices? Or maybe, and this is kind of what Shakespeare hints at, it's a little of both.
Yeah, he's clever like that. And he doesn't just tell us about their fate. He foreshadows it all through the play.
Yeah.
Romeo has these premonitions about death, and Juliet, she's scared of tombs, right? It's Shakespeare keeps reminding us about, the tragedy that's going to happen.
It's how he builds tension, masterfully. And for people studying the play, it's a chance to look at how Shakespeare uses language to mess with the audience's emotions. He keeps us hooked, even though we know how it ends.
It's like a literary roller coaster.
Yeah.
But can we talk about the play's structure for a sec? How does Shakespeare pull together all these different storylines and characters?
He's so good at using subplots to make the main story even better. For example, you've got Romeo, and he's, totally into Rosalina first, but that actually helps us see how powerful his love for Juliet really is.
So it's Rosalind's a warm-up, She helps Romeo understand the difference between a little crush and a love that takes over your whole life.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's that other subplot where Paris is trying to, win over Juliet, and that shows us all the pressure she's under, stuck between what her family wants and what she wants.
Ah, poor Juliet. She has so much going on. It's no wonder she does these, crazy things to try and get away from what's supposed to happen to her.
And those crazy things, well, they bring us to one of the most, I don't know, powerful and maybe controversial characters in the play, Friar Lawrence. Is he just a nice guy who makes mistakes, or is he the reason everything goes wrong?
Ooh, that's a good question. I mean, he comes up with that whole potion idea, which, looking back, seems kind of reckless, right?
Yeah, but he's trying to do the right thing, supposedly. He wants Romeo and Juliet to be together and for the families to stop fighting. It's like a reminder that even the best plans, they can totally backfire, especially when you're dealing with something as strong as love and hate.
Oh, and we can't forget about, plain old bad luck. If only Romeo had gotten that message.
Oh, man, yeah. The cruel hand of fate. Or maybe just, a bunch of bad coincidences. These elements of, chance and timing, they really highlight the play's main question. Do we control our own destiny, or are we just, pieces in someone else's game?
Okay, so we've got these big themes, complex characters, and a plot that's, all over the place like a Shakespearean sonnet. But what about the actual language? What makes the language in Romeo and Juliet so amazing?
Shakespeare. Flowing, he mixes, poetry and prose, high-flown metaphors, and these down-to-earth puns. It all creates like a tapestry of words that's both like gorgeous and deep.
It's not just telling the story, right? It's like painting these vivid pictures in your head. Like when
Yeah.
Romeo compares Juliet to the sun, he's not just, being romantic. He's making her into this like divine, radiant being.
Right. And that's just one example of how he uses imagery. Light and dark, day and night, these like motifs, they run through the whole play. They're not just about love and hate, but like youth and age, hope and despair.
It's like every single word has all these different meanings. It's no wonder people have been studying this play for like centuries.
Yeah.
Yeah, and for students studying literature, Romeo and Juliet is like a playground where they can explore all those layers. You can analyze the poetry, figure out the symbols. It's a masterclass in how language creates meaning, makes you feel things, and, ultimately it goes beyond time itself. Welcome back to our deep dive. We're still exploring Romeo and Juliet. It's a play that, really means a lot to students studying literature, even, gosh, all this time later.
You know what always gets me about this play? It's how Shakespeare uses like these opposites to make the drama even bigger. Like he's always playing with love and hate, young and old, light and dark, that kind of thing.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Those contrasting things, they're all over the play. They add like so much meaning and, make it more complicated. He's not just telling a story, he's really looking at like what it means to be human with all our, contradictions.
And one of the biggest contrasts, I think, is between the lovers, all like passionate and impulsive, and then the older generation who are so like stuck in their ways and full of hate.
Right. Romeo and Juliet, they're all about their feelings. They live in this world of like intense emotions and they don't care about their family's feud.
And their parents, the Montagues and Capulets, they're just trapped in this cycle of like hate and violence. They can't see past their grudge.
Yeah, it's almost like Shakespeare's showing us, society and making us think about how prejudice can destroy things and how bad it can be to like cling to the past.
And speaking of like bad stuff happening, let's talk about that duel between, Mercutio and Tybalt. That's like the turning point in the play, right? Where it goes from like romantic and funny to totally tragic.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a powerful scene, both exciting and really sad. Mercutio, with all his like jokes and cleverness, he represents, how carefree young people can be. And then Tybalt, he's all that blind rage and hate that's driving the feud.
And Romeo, he's right in the middle. He has to make a choice, and it ends up having like terrible consequences.
It's classic Shakespeare, using dramatic irony to like build the tension. We, the audience, we know that Romeo is now related to Tybalt because of the marriage, but Tybalt doesn't know, so he challenges Romeo to a duel.
Oh, the irony. I can just imagine people watching this back then like wanted to yell, "No, don't do it."
Exactly. He's a master at like keeping the audience hooked and making them feel things.
And then the duel itself. It's so fast and emotional. Mercutio's death, the way he talks about it, it's so shocking and moving. It's no wonder it's one of the most famous scenes in like all of Shakespeare.
It's a scene that really shows how good Shakespeare is with language and how he can create characters that are like larger than life, but also, totally human.
It's interesting how he uses different kinds of poetry to like set his characters apart. Like when Romeo's all hung up on Rosalind,
Yeah.
he uses those Petrarchan sonnets, right? All
Right.
flowery language and stuff from like ancient myths.
Yeah. Romeo, the lovesick poet, lost in his fantasy world. But when he meets Juliet, his language changes. It's more, I don't know, direct, natural. It shows how real their connection is.
Like Shakespeare saying, true love doesn't need all that fancy stuff. It has its own language.
Exactly. And that change in language is just one way Shakespeare, uses every trick he knows to create this rich and detailed picture of love, hate, and everything in between.
And his use of imagery, it's just masterful. Light and dark, day and night, these images, they're everywhere in the play. They add like symbolic meaning.
Yeah, and those symbols, they work on so many levels. Like light can be love, youth, hope, and darkness. That's often, hate, getting older, despair.
It's like when Romeo calls Juliet the sun.
Mm.
He's not just, sweet-talking her. He's turning her into this like radiant, powerful force.
It's such a great use of imagery. It shows how strong their love is, even when everything's dark and hopeless.
And then there's that balcony scene. Juliet talks about night's cloak and the mask of night. She wants to escape, her family and all that under the cover of darkness.
Yeah, it's romantic and rebellious at the same time. It shows how strong Juliet is and how she's willing to go against, like, what's expected of her.
And it also shows how night can be, both a time for secrets and a time for freedom.
Exactly. He uses these simple images to explore big ideas about love, who we are, and just, like, what it means to be human.
And let's not forget about all the foreshadowing. It's like he keeps giving us hints about the tragedy that's coming. It keeps us, totally on edge.
Oh, yeah, right from the start. The chorus talks about star-crossed lovers and death-marked love. Shakespeare sets the stage for this tale of love and loss. And we're left wondering, is this like their destiny or can they change things?
And even beyond that, there are all these little hints throughout the play. Like Romeo has that dream where Juliet finds him dead and Juliet's scared of like being buried alive.
It's those little details that make the play so deep and complex. We have to like read between the lines and think about how fate and free will work together.
Speaking of free will, I've always wondered about Friar Lawrence. Like, did he have any other options besides that whole potion plan?
People have been debating that for ages. Was he just trying to help but messed it up, or did he really think he could make things work out for Romeo and Juliet?
I mean, his heart was in the right place, but that plan, it seems like it was never going to work. Using messages and messengers back then, super risky.
Yeah. But it shows how complicated people are, you know? Even when you have the best intentions, things can go wrong, really wrong.
It's like even in a world with like grand passions and dramatic speeches, it's the small stuff, the little choices that can really determine what happens to us.
And that brings us back to the heart of Romeo and Juliet. It's this, timeless exploration of love, loss, and the things that shape our lives.
It's a story that still speaks to us today, reminding us about the power of love, how fragile life is, and the big questions that stay with us. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
So we've been, exploring Romeo and Juliet. We've talked about the themes, looked at the language, and thought about, its place in literary history.
It's one of those plays that, you can interpret in so many ways, and there's always more to discuss. That's why it's, essential for anyone studying literature, really.
And it's kind of wild how a story written, gosh, over 400 years ago can still, feel so relevant today. I mean, yeah, we don't have sword fights in the streets anymore, but the themes, right? Love, loss, fighting against, what society expects of you, that's stuff we all deal with.
For sure. Shakespeare, he was just so good at tapping into, those universal human experiences.
Yeah.
He got the emotions we all feel, love, hate, jealousy, despair, those things, they don't go away no matter what time or place you're in. And he wasn't afraid to show the messy side of those emotions. Romeo and Juliet, their love, it's huge. It takes over everything, but it also makes them, act without thinking, even recklessly sometimes.
And that's what makes them so interesting. They're not perfect, they mess up, but I don't know, their flaws make them more human, more relatable.
And their story, it makes you think about that question, are we in control of our lives or are we, at the mercy of fate? The play seems to say it's a little bit of both.
Yeah, there's this push and pull between what we choose and what just happens to us. Romeo and Juliet, they make choices that lead to, their downfall. But those choices, they're influenced by the feud, by what society expects, by just random encounters.
It's like they're stuck in this web and they can't get out.
Yeah.
And that feeling that something bad is going to happen, that impending doom, it's what makes the play so captivating.
Shakespeare, he's a master at building that tension. He uses foreshadowing, dramatic irony, and those sudden shifts in tone, going from playful joking to deep gut-wrenching sadness. It's amazing.
And we can't forget the ending. It's probably one of the most famous and debated endings in all of literature. Why do you think Shakespeare decided to end it with, both Romeo and Juliet dying?
There's so many ways to look at it. Some people see it as a necessary sacrifice to end the feud. Their deaths, they bring peace to Verona.
So their love, it changes things, even though it's, a horrible price to pay.
Yeah. And some people see it as a statement about how destructive hate and prejudice can be. Even the most beautiful things can be poisoned by it.
It reminds us that even when there's love and hope, sometimes, darkness wins.
Right. And then there's the idea that they die because of their own choices. It's a tragic reminder that we need to think clearly and be careful, not just follow our emotions.
Like Shakespeare's saying, love is powerful, but it can blind you. You got to use your head too.
Yeah, exactly. But No matter how you interpret the ending, it definitely hits you hard emotionally. You're left with this feeling of loss, but also, a deep sense of hope.
Hope that maybe their sacrifice will make things better in the future.
And hope that love, even when it ends tragically, can, overcome hate and inspire change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into Romeo and Juliet, what do you think is the biggest takeaway, especially for students who are, really studying literature?
I think it's understanding that this play, it's more than just a story. It's like a mirror showing us how complicated human life is. It's a tapestry made up of language, symbolism, and themes that, never really get old.
It makes us think critically, question what we believe, and grapple with those big questions that have, been around forever.
Yeah, and it reminds us how powerful stories can be. Words can take us to different worlds, make us feel deeply, and stay with us long after we've, finished reading.
Well said. And to everyone listening, we really encourage you to, keep exploring Romeo and Juliet on your own. Really dig into it and see all the layers it has.
It's a play that you can read again and again, and each time you'll find something new, some new meaning, some new beauty.
And maybe as you read, you'll find yourself asking those same questions that, have kept people fascinated for centuries.
Questions about love, fate, and the choices we make that, shape who we are.
Until next time, happy reading.